What I'm trying to do is trying to point out that he has something in common with James Brown, in that I think he's the hardest working man in Hollywood. I'd like to introduce to the stage John Favro. So I have to say, I really am appreciative of you being here, and I think everybody here would say the same thing.
Well, you've done such good work with us and been so cooperative and helpful in trying to figure out new ways to approach production using all these real-time rendering tools that it's my pleasure to be here because you guys have really gone the extra mile for us.
Awesome. So being that we're here at Siggрафа, which is kind of the preeminent conference for computer graphics and interactive tool sets and techniques, I thought I'd ask you a little bit about your background in terms of kind of how you've moved through time and used these tools and kind of started to bring computer graphics and these tools into filmmaking, but specifically into storytelling.
Well, I was a bit of a Luddite at first. I loved the CG in Jurassic Park, but I was very skeptical about it because if you remember, after the initial burst of really good CG work, it started to be applied to everything. And so I tended to lean towards the practical stuff like on Zathura, but by the time I hit Iron Man, that's when the hard surface stuff started to become really good, and ILM.
Yeah.
I started giving notes on practical shots, thinking that they were CG, so I knew we crossed that threshold. And so I started to trust it for hard surfaces, but not for other things yet. Eventually, by the time I did Jungle Book, that's when I started to believe in fur rendering and for rendering animals. So it was waiting for the technology to get to the point that it was good enough to have it be seamless in the production. And it was actually on Jungle Book, when we were moving those green screens around, I started to get very frustrated with how long it took in production. And also there was so much CG environments that no matter how much you planned it, you were still pushing a lot of the decision making in post-production.
Yeah.
And you don't have your department heads anymore. You're in post. The VFX supervisor takes over for your production designer. They take over for your cinematographer, and you're remaking the movie later in post. So that was something that was sort of nagging at me, like how do you have a better green screen stage where you don't have to move the green screen around and not just relying on like simulcam or something that was volume based to figure out what it was. So that was sort of nagging at me. At the same time, Andy Jones, who was my animation supervisor, was telling me about a demo that they were doing at Weaver. They had a development kit for the new Vive.
Right.
It hadn't been out yet. I went over there and saw VR for the first time on that platform. And I was really excited by it just as a medium, not as a production tool.
Right.
And I saw the blue, which is the one with the whale, which is really cool. It just was very striking, and I saw the potential of what VR could do. I started actually working with them on a project called Gnomes and Goblins. I think you have a clip of.
Actually, we do. Why don't we? We could run that as well. Yeah.
The idea of being in a world and having presence and eye contact with little creatures. We did a demo about 3 years back that's up on Steam. And we've been working on Gnomes and Goblins all the way through. That was on Unreal. So that was my first experience with Evan. And I was really excited by how, the quality of the real-time renders in VR and making you, it was close enough for you to feel like you were in a real environment.
Right.
Even though it was, you're dealing with real-time rendering.
Right.
At that point, we were starting to mess around. At the end of Jungle Book, we started messing around with this consumer-facing VR equipment and started to develop camera tools that we could do. I think what was talked about by the last speaker,
right?
With using with it, creating basically a multiplayer filmmaking game in VR, and so we said if we were ever going to do a film like Jungle Book again, we could use that. And lo and behold, we did Lion King next. And we built a tool set with Magnopus. And we were working with a lot of different people, different vendors, different platforms, and came up with a system by which we did the camera capture for Lion King using filmmaking tools within VR so that It wasn't going to be just a previs person on a box, but it was going to be Caleb Deschanel as my cinematographer. I would have James Chidlin as my production designer. We would build our sets, upload it into VR, and we would scout around in VR and have this iterative process where we'd go to the location, just like you would on a live action shoot, and discuss camera angles, pick lenses. Andy would do the animation, so we pre-animated everything. And we would shoot it as though we were, we'd stand there looking at the lions and we would shoot it using those.
I think the unintended consequences kind of in the 90s. I mean, I remember, seeing like the test of Jurassic Park and going like, oh man, things are about to change. But there was this unintended consequence of like kind of all of the visuals being removed from the actual process. And I think, even to this point, this conversation about, how do you deal with the intricacies of how something looks through notes?
Right, and that's the problem, right? In post-production, you're giving notes. By the time that note gets from your supervisor to the person in the department and to the person on the box, they're just going off a checklist, and they work so hard, and there's such a big workload. We would do things like we would get the shot back, instead of giving it a layout note, we would pull it back in and operate. Rob Legato would run the wheels and we would operate over the shot. So we just said, here, this is it, and then let them conform it and do the render on top of it. And when you save those iterations, it saves so much work with the people who are actually the technicians and the artists. I think it's debilitating to have so much work being done that doesn't hit the screen. So it maximizes the efficiencies, and also I think creates a sharper, more focused group of collective of artists that are working on this vision. And it also allows you to do a lot of planning in advance too, because you create essentially your own previs. And we do this on The Mandalorian in pre-production too. We've taken this learning, and that's the project that we collaborated on. We use a VCAM system, because I'm working a lot of times with directors who don't have a lot of experience as the executive producer, and it gets to be an apprenticeship program where we get to make the movie essentially in VR, send those dailies to the editor, and we have a cut of the film that serves the purpose that previs would have. And so you're using it in the case of Lion King in lieu of layout, and in the case of The Mandalorian of the live action productions in lieu of previs. But it allows for collaboration, and so when you finally hit the set, you are looking at the set extending out if you're in VR, or in the case of Mandalorian, we have video walls. And so the real-time render we thought was just going to be for interactive light or for dynamic moving green screens, which is to solve the problem from Jungle Book. Just to create a more efficient workflow on the set, so we weren't relighting and moving everything, but we could actually drag and move a halo of green behind the person and have all that great interactive light that made Gravity look so good, or that we used for Jungle Book. But then we ended up, when we were talking, Kim Library was on the team. We were like, maybe someday we could get Final Pixel set extension. We got like a tremendous percentage of shots that actually worked in camera just with the real-time renders in engine that I didn't think Epic was going to be capable of. But for certain types of shots, depending on the focal length and shooting with anamorphic lenses, there's a lot of times when it wasn't just for interactive, but you actually got to look at, and even if we ended up replacing the backgrounds, we could see in camera the lighting, the interactive light, the layout, the background, the horizon. We didn't have to bash things together later. And then even if we had to up-res them or replace them, we had the basis for it and all the interactive light. And so the back and forth on a TV schedule is, what you could have a year and a half to mess around with on a film. You don't have that kind of turnaround time. And so you get that precision. So I think that the real-time render, and then as you get into ray tracing and as you get into better rendering, I see it as this convergence that's not gonna, I don't think it's two different things. I guess that's the point I'm making. I messed around in VR, but all the things I learned in VR I brought over to filmmaking and for television. So I think it creates this dynamic environment for creative types, and not just people who have the resources of a studio, but people who do it with a gaming system.
It feels like everybody coming to set is bringing their best self to the set, right? So it's like your cinematographer isn't like, lighting to something that is green screen that's going to happen later on down the, like they're in there telling you little intricacies, and I think you know, part of that, at least from what I've observed, is those happy accidents, those things that is because someone lights something a certain way, or those kind of little things. If you can make that happen all together, that's where the magic of filmmaking.
And I think it also forces you to make creative decisions early and not kick the can down the road, because you go to a set, you put up a green screen, you figure it out later. But here you have all of these brilliant people with, we have 100 years of experience making cinema. Why abandon that just because we're disrupting the tech?
Yeah.
Let's inherit the skill set of these great artists and build tools out. I mean, Avid did a great job of figuring out a way to have an editing suite that was user-friendly enough that somebody who didn't have a tech background could cut a film because you emulated those tools. And as we build out different tool sets for virtual camera, we would build things for Caleb. Mm-hmm. And he would say, boy, I wish we could actually dynamically pull focus. He would bring in his piece of gear that he'd use on a real film set, and we'd encode it, do a code dump, and lo and behold, Monday morning, we'd be pulling focus live, and then you get those happy accidents you're talking about. Because we had on the set of Lion King, dolly track, a crane. If you came to our set, you would see a black box filled with a full crew, assistant directors, script supervisor, dolly grip, crane grip, focus puller, everything, except the lighting department would be on boxes. And Caleb would say, no, don't light it like that. You put a 10K here.
And that vocabulary is film vocabulary.
And they're teaching the people with the tech basis what that is, and also what's the chain of command on a set. Just because anybody can walk over and move a tree or something in the set doesn't mean you should. You need to inherit an AD or a set dresser has to be in charge of that, so that we inherit the culture of cinema. And that also means the collaborative nature of filmmaking that technology enables, and real-time rendering offers a tremendous opportunity to condense that and incorporate everybody's vision into it, so they don't show up at the premiere and get surprised by what lighting decisions you make.
Well, so you also touched on something else in talking about department heads. You mentioned editors.
Yes.
And so another aspect, and I'd like you to touch on a little bit, is that instant feedback of what something is going to look like. Because we've also talked to other people, like in the stunt or in the action design department. They're actually able to do things which are saving days on shooting, and allowing also for the editor to know what it's going to look like, so that you can start making decisions.
So we'll do like simple mocap to create essentially previs, but if you have your stunt performers wearing like Moven suits and you digitize them, and you've already taped off the set and you have a digital environment, you could have them run it, set cameras, and do a pre-cut to see what you want to do. And then if you want a keyframe, you just go right on top of that, or you do a more robust capture system. But all of it started with us really inheriting what Jim Cameron did on Avatar. That was, we busted those crates open when we were doing Jungle Book, and we were inheriting this like 10-year-old tool set, but those tools were very specific to data-rich, data-heavy performance capture that we didn't really need if we were going to have bears going around the jungle. We were going to keyframe that anyway. So we found that we just needed to be tracking the camera movement to get all the idiosyncrasies of the camera movement for Lion King. But now you have all this consumer-facing hardware that wasn't available back then, and with no latency, you move, you look, everything's locked in. You're always dropping a few frames on the motion capture stuff. It wasn't really designed for real-time camera movement in the same way that you could achieve if you were capturing in a completely digital environment where there's no latency, and you could have an operator really operating using gear heads, using hydro heads or fluid heads. So the tech breakthrough has actually crossed the line where the technical people feel comfortable enough using it that they don't feel that they're being pushed away from the tool set that they're used to using in analog filming.